In 1957, police in a small Wisconsin town made a discovery so disturbing, it changed horror forever. They were searching for a missing woman named Bernice Warden. Her truck was found outside Ed Gein's farmhouse, a quiet, lonely man everyone in town thought was harmless. But inside his house, police found something straight out of a nightmare. The walls were lined with human skin. Chairs and lamps were made from bones. There were boxes filled with organs, and a mask made from someone's face. Gein admitted he had been digging up graves for years, using the bodies to build what he called a woman's suit, so he could pretend to be his dead mother. He was declared insane and sent to a mental institution, where he lived until his death in 1984. But what police found that night still inspires movies and nightmares to this day. So what do you think? Was Ed Gein pure evil? Or just the product of a mind completely broken by his past? Follow for more true crime horrors that will keep you up at night.
It's caught on tape by a Houston woman who says she secretly recorded a doctor and staff during her surgery. Now, in these recordings, you hear remarks about her looks and her personality.
Listen carefully, because few ever hear this. Secret recordings a patient says she made from the operating room. Ethel Easter says she hid a recorder in her hair extensions before going under the knife for a hernia operation. Easter says the hospital workers made disparaging comments about her body.
I was appalled, I was distraught, I was violated, thinking that I'm lying there naked after the surgery, and they have me still uncovered talking over my body like this.
And listen to this.
Precious, yes. This is Precious over here, saying hi to Precious over there.
It was racially profiling me, yes. I was offended by it.
Easter says she decided to secretly record her surgery after a tense meeting with the doctor. In a letter to Easter, the hospital, Harris Healthcare, says it has...
This woman was heartlessly abandoned by her husband because of the loose lower abdomen after giving birth. What she did to her own body in order to regain her figure was truly shocking. Camila, 25 years old, lived in Brazil with her husband and child. She had given everything for her family. However, after giving birth, her body changed. Her abdomen became flabby, and stretch marks appeared, which led to her husband's disgust. He started to ignore her, and became increasingly cold towards her. Until one day, he said to her, "You make me feel sick. Just seeing you makes me feel nauseous." After saying that, he left without looking back. Camilla fell into despair and vowed to do whatever it took to get her figure back. She disappeared for the next few days. When she reappeared, she was a completely different person, but she suffered from unbearable pain in her abdomen. When the doctors examined her abdomen, they were completely stunned. Do you want to know what exactly Camilla did? Follow me and type belly in the comment section to unlock the second part.
He made her call her boyfriend, but she dialed 911 and outsmarted him. What was supposed to be a moment of control and humiliation turned into a brilliant act of survival and justice. 27-year-old Robert Giles abducted a woman from outside a grocery store and forced her into his car. As he drove, he made a chilling demand, "Call your boyfriend. I want him to hear everything that's about to happen." But what he didn't realize was that the woman had other plans. Staying calm under unimaginable pressure, she pretended to follow his command, dialing a number, speaking sweetly, calling the person on the other end baby, but it wasn't her boyfriend. It was 911. The dispatcher immediately picked up on her coded language. While posing as her boyfriend, he kept the conversation going and discreetly dispatched officers to track the call. Meanwhile, Giles drove to a secluded spot behind an adult store near Jonesboro and continued his horrific act, unaware the police were closing in. When officers arrived, they caught him in the act. He was arrested on the spot and now faces multiple serious charges. This woman's quick thinking and the dispatcher's sharp instincts likely saved her life. Let us know what you think in the comments. Should this man ever walk free again?
For one, that's a suicide. By the way, these are the crime scene photos released in this documentary that I'm watching. And another thing, for the fight that had happened in the room with Kaylee and Maddie and BK, these are the type of markings that I was saying there wasn't present on the white walls or even on the pillow where they found the bodies. These are the type of clear struggle markings that should have been there if Haley's face was, destroyed the way that they said it was, and she was stabbed like 30-something times. And she fought back, they said. So she was so confined on that little tiny space on the bed, and the walls next to her had the slightest drops of, like splatter. And then there was no like scuff marks like this all over the wall. For 2, we're showing bodies. I'm sorry, is she not as important as the Idaho 4 victim? Like, I'm confused. Why is there no uproar about these crime scene photos being in this documentary? This is okay, but the Idaho 4 crime scene photos, not that I want to see the bodies, but it's just the principle here. The whole internet is in an uproar over those photos being released, but nobody could care less about anyone else's photos being released, let alone put into a documentary the way that these were. Whatever, I'm gonna keep watching.
This book, written for pedophiles, was so disturbing that the author was arrested. So this is Australian author Lauren Tesselin-Mastrosa. Lauren wrote under the nickname Tori Woods. Earlier this year, Lauren began promoting her new book, Daddy's Little Toy. And as you can see here, it had a full promotional rollout, and she was promoting this all across her social media. She claimed that the book was a sort of erotic retelling of the Cinderella story. But when people actually started reading the book, they were shocked and absolutely disturbed. In the book, the main character starts falling in love with a girl when she is only 3 years old. Keep in mind, at the time, the man who is falling in love with this child is fully grown, and it's very graphic and very disturbing. Now, this is shocking, but here are some quotes and excerpts from the book. Now, I highly encourage you to just see how disturbing this was, to pause the video and actually read some of this stuff. I mean, it is shockingly graphic and shockingly disturbing. And according to people online, this isn't even close to the worst stuff that was found in the book. This was a part of what looks to be some of the promotional materials. So people actually started talking about this, and it became a huge thing in Australia, and word eventually reached the Australian authorities. And so Australian police executed a search warrant on Lauren's home, and according to them, they, quote, obtained several copies of the novel to be forensically examined and charged her with possessing child abuse material, disseminating child abuse material, and producing child abuse material. Now, she has claimed that she is innocent and has said that her work has been completely misrepresented, but just reading those short clips, we know that that isn't true. Clearly, she knew what she was writing, and she knew that this was extremely disturbing. This wasn't an age gap romance, as she claimed, which I still find to be extremely disturbing, age gaps in general. This was straight up some sort of fanfic for pedophiles. Lauren's trial hasn't happened yet, but I'm very eager to see what happens here because this is a very unique case. But it's just so eerie and bizarre to see these promotional materials acting like this book was going to be some sort of big smash hit bestseller, when in reality we now know that it contains some of the most horrific stuff that's been published in the last, I don't know, couple years, decade.
I actually never heard of this case until this comment, so let's get into it. Let me introduce the 3 bad guys of the story, okay? We have Roger Stafford, his wife Verna Stafford, and then his brother Harold Stafford. They are career criminals who rob people to make a living. So on June 22nd of 1978, they had this plan that they were going to rob a motel. That plan fell through. They ended up coming up with an alternate plan that they were going to park on Interstate 35 in Purcell, Oklahoma, and lift up the hood of their car, have Verna go out and pretend like the car was broken down, and then they were going to rob whoever stopped. The family who stopped was Melvin Lorenz and his wife Linda Lorenz. Both of them were tech sergeants in the Air Force, and then Melvin's son Richard Lorenz. He was 12 or 13 at the time. They were driving from Texas, where they were stationed, up to North Dakota for Melvin's mother's funeral. They stopped to help the Staffords. Roger attempted to rob Melvin. Melvin wouldn't allow him to rob him, and so the Staffords shot and killed all 3 members of the Lorenz family. Another photo of Richard Lorenz. Then 3 weeks later, the trio would commit another horrific crime. On July 16th of 1978, Roger, Verna, and Harold went and parked outside of a sirloin stockade restaurant in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. They waited for all of the customers to leave, and then around 10 p.m. they went and knocked on the door, and when the manager opened the door, he found Roger and Harold pointing guns in his face. He demanded all the money from the cash register and the safe, and the manager was complying, but apparently he was kind of making some comments under his breath, and he said something like, "I don't understand why people have to steal money instead of just going to make it on their own." And this infuriated Roger, and so he had the manager herd all of the remaining employees, it was the manager and 5 other employees, into the restaurant's deep freezer. And then Roger and Harold opened fire and murdered all of them. Victims included 17-year-old David Lindsay, 16-year-old David Salzman, 17-year-old Anthony Tu, 15-year-old Terry Horst, 43-year-old Luis Zacharias, and 56-year-old Isaac Freeman. And I have to say, given all the true crime cases I've looked at, the police work in this case is pretty impressive. Police immediately launched an investigation. They took fingerprints, they took ballistics evidence, and this is how they found out that there was multiple perpetrators of this crime. Had a psychological profiler look at the case, Dr. Vernon Sisney. He said that the suspects were probably from poor backgrounds, they were probably excellent marksmen, they may have been on drugs, and they were possibly distrustful of one another. And police did initially look for a link between the Lorenz family murders and the Sirloin Stockade murders, but they were kind of stalled a little bit because the ballistics evidence didn't match. Neither case ever went cold, though. The police were making steady progress on both of them. There were a lot of different eyewitness accounts being taken into consideration. Witnesses had seen someone driving in the Lorenz family's stolen pickup. They found that truck abandoned later. That's more evidence. They found guns that were found abandoned in stolen rental cars. There was all kinds of stuff going on. There actually ended up being 6 key eyewitnesses that split the reward for Stafford's arrest. Puzzle pieces were falling into place. The straw that finally broke the camel's back in this case is in January of 1980, so like a year and a half after the murders, Roger got super drunk, called the police, and said, my brother Harold, who Harold was dead at this point, he died like a week after the Sirloin Stockade murders in a motorcycle accident, and my wife Verna, they committed these murders. It was them, not me. Until then, police hadn't connected the Staffords to either of these crimes, but once they did, it took them less than 3 months to have Verna and Roger in custody. Roger Stafford was ultimately convicted of 6 murders, the 3 Lorenz family murders, and the 6 Sirloin Stockade murders. I do want to point out, Verna did also implicate him in a 1974 McDonald's robbery in which a 20-year-old named Jimmy Berry was murdered in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, but Roger was never convicted of that crime. He was sentenced to death. While he was on death row, Verna divorced him. He remarried multiple times, I think 2 more times. And in 1995, Roger was executed via lethal injection, allegedly with a huge smile on his face. You can pause and read his final words here if you want. And for her role in the crimes, Verna, who did play a role in the crimes, it was the bait for the Lorenz family to stop, and then she did shoot people at the Sirloin Stockade murders, though she said she was forced to. She was sentenced to 2 life sentences. I thought this was interesting. At her sentencing, the judge looked at her and said, quote, I would wager that there is one of the hottest corners of hell vacant with your name right above it. And as of 2024, she is still incarcerated. All of her appeals have been denied.
So check this crazy ass loophole I just went through. I nutted in the condom. Put water in the condom. Okay? Then, you want to take it a step further? Put the condom over a light. At that point, you're going to see a homemade lava lamp. Not gabbing though.
This car has to be towed. Yeah, you get everything out of it. Do me a favor. Walk over to that car and just see what you smell. What? Open that up. Open that up. What the f***? Get the f*** in! Put your hands up! It looks like a kid that's curled up.
This is Nicole Johnson, and she just committed one of the most disgusting crimes that you will ever hear of to 2 young children. Back in 2019, a mother in Baltimore County had to make a desperate decision. She would ask her sister, Nicole Michelle Johnson, to take care of her 2 young children, 7-year-old Jocelyn and 5-year-old Larry, just until she got back on her feet. Nicole promised her sister that she was going to keep these 2 children safe for her, but that promise would end in horror. What began as a temporary arrangement quickly turned into isolation, neglect, and abuse. The children would be removed from school, cut off from doctors, and hidden from the entire world. Then disaster would strike. In May 2020, an argument over the behavior of the children would strike up and turn deadly. As tempers would flare, Nicole would strike Jocelyn so hard that the young child would hit her head and pass away. And instead of calling for help though, Nicole decided to wrap her niece up in a trash bag, stuff her in a suitcase, and place her in the trunk of her car, where she would remain for the following year until tragedy would strike once more. Approximately 1 year later, Larry would pass away as well, and Nicole claimed that he simply went to sleep and never woke up. So she wrapped his body up in some plastic and a blanket and placed him in the trunk right next to his deceased sister.
I was just like getting drowsy, the last thing he said, can I lay him down?
Can you lay him down?
Yes, because he was sitting up in the chair. And he said, my nigga, can you lay me down? And I said, yeah, honey.
Then came the day that everything would unravel. Nicole would be pulled over for fake tags, no insurance, and an unregistered vehicle. Given these various reasons, the police officers would inform Nicole that she had to remove herself from the vehicle because they were calling a tow truck.
Tags. This car has to be towed. Yeah, you get everything out of it, but how long did you have to stop?
Like almost 30 days.
Sitting in his car and putting down Miss Johnson's information into the system, the police officer would notice something very strange as well. After Miss Johnson had asked him if she would be able to get her things out of the back of the car, while the police officer was in the car, he noticed her open up her trunk, and there was tons of bags and trash, it seemed like, in the back seat. And on top of this, while the police officer was trying to get her information, and he would realize that she had been pulled over for this exact same reason already.
Miss Johnson, you come over here. So you got pulled over for the same stuff already?
That's why I went, and I really thought I got good tags.
But as they prepared to impound the vehicle, something would stop them. The smell. That unmistakable, horrifying odor of death. Given this smell and the reasonable concern that came along with it, police officers would then begin to question Nicole. They would continue to speak to her before asking her to open up the trunk. As Nicole was opening the trunk, she would say something extremely eerie. She would say, "Y'all are gonna see me on the news, making my big debut." And as she opened the trunk, the police would be greeted by a horrifying sight that no human should ever have to see.
Open it up, ma'am.
I did.
Unroll the whole thing. What? Open that up. Open that up. What the f***? Get the f*** in! Put your hands up! Don't you
Inside of the trunk, police would find the maggot-infested remains of Larry wrapped up in a blanket inside of a plastic tote. And along with that, they would also find the garbage bag containing Jocelyn's tiny, decomposed body. Nicole, of course, would be arrested on the spot. Now we can fast forward to 2024, where after a court case, Nicole Michelle Johnson would plead guilty to 2 counts of first-degree child abuse, resulting in death. And in February 2025, Nicole Johnson would be sentenced to 50 years in prison, with all but life suspended. She is barred from ever contacting children again.
I ain't respond to no false narratives. I ain't say nothing. I let them post, make videos, and right now today, guess what I got? So both families, we took an L. But that shit y'all put out there, oh, she looked in his phone and she snapped and he went out the coward way. My sister was too raw. Why would she kill herself to make the envious people of her happy? She too raw for that. I can only be strong.
Everybody out here, I heard her say, I'm gonna go get my brother.
On October 3rd, 2025, just after 2:30 a.m., the Englewood neighborhood of Chicago woke not to the usual symphony of sirens and freight trains rattling through night, but to something far more intimate and shattering. A 911 call crackled through dispatch, muffled voices, a neighbor's hesitant report of pops like firecrackers, too close, too final. Chicago police officers rolled up to the 6600 block of South Normal Avenue, tires crunching over broken glass from a recent storm. What they found inside that unassuming 2-story home would unravel a family's world and ignite a firestorm of questions that still burn today. 2 bodies lay still in the dim glow of a single lamp. Joanna Dagan, 38, a mother with a laugh that could light up block parties, sprawled near the living room couch, her life snuffed out by a single gunshot to the head. Beside her, Noon Thurman, 44, her boyfriend of 2 years, equally motionless, the same grim signature on his temple. A handgun rested inches from his hand, its barrel warm, the air thick with a metallic tang of cordite, and something deeper, betrayal Rage, unspoken pain, no signs of forced entry, no witnesses beyond the walls that held their secrets. Police zipped up the scene in under an hour, but the whispers started before the coroner's van pulled away. At first glance, it screamed murder-suicide, a lover's quarrel gone lethal. The kind that tabloids devour and communities shake their heads over.
If you need a reason to never go on a cruise, just look up how many people either mysteriously die on or go missing from them. And whenever I start thinking that it would be fun, I automatically think of this guy. He disappeared from a Royal Caribbean cruise ship in 2005 on what was supposed to be an exciting 2-week honeymoon with his new wife. A lot of his blood was found in his cabin and on the side of the ship, and at first, police thought that he simply fell overboard in an accident. But then little things started to not really add up, like how the last 4 men that he was ever seen with, who he met on the cruise, used his keycard to enter his cabin. And then shortly after, neighbors heard a massive fight out on his balcony and a horrific thud. How these same 4 men recorded themselves after, laughing and joking about its death. Yet at the time, no one knew he was even missing. How again, these same 4 men also SA'd an 18-year-old girl on the very same cruise ship. And they recorded that as well, yet nothing was ever done about it. This is probably one of the very few cases where we know exactly what happened and who was involved. There's just not enough evidence to prove it. This is the mysterious disappearance and likely murder of George Smith. And in this case, everyone has something to hide and seems to be lying, so let's talk about it. This is George Smith. He was 26 years old when he suddenly and very mysteriously disappeared in 2005. George was a computer search engine analyst, and he lived in Greenwich, Connecticut with the rest of his family, who he was really close with. Everyone who knew him said that he was the funniest man alive, and if he loved you with his whole heart. And he was also incredibly smart too. On June 25th, 2005, he married a woman named Jennifer, who was about to become a school teacher, and together they seemed really happy. They had a beautiful cliffside ceremony in Newport, Rhode Island, and this was only the start of what they thought would be a long and beautiful life. But sadly, this would all be cut short just 11 days later. It's now June 29th, 2005, and the newlyweds set off for a 2-week Mediterranean honeymoon cruise. It was something they were both excited about because they would make stops in some of the most beautiful destinations, like Greece, Turkey, and Italy. They boarded the Royal Caribbean Brilliance of the Seas cruise ship and set sail from Barcelona, Spain. Once on the ship, the couple quickly began making new friends, one of which was Josh Askin, who was a California college student, and his family, who were also on the cruise. They all bonded on a tour of Florence, Italy, and George, Jennifer, and Josh all became super close right off the bat. The day George disappeared was probably one of the best days of his life. He and Jennifer spent the day touring Mykonos, which is one of his favorite places, and that night, the two had a romantic dinner on the ship and toasted to their future together. At around midnight, the couple went to the casino on the 3rd floor of the ship and began drinking quite a bit. There they met up with Josh and 3 other men, Greg and Zach Rosenberg, who were cousins, and their friend Rusty Kaufman. They were all Russian-American students at the time who were also all on the cruise. The cruise ship security cameras capture everyone throughout the night, and at first everything seems to be going okay. A couple of hours go by, and this is when they all decide to go to the cruise ship's disco. There they got even more drunk, and some reports say that they were drinking a bottle of absinthe that George secretly snuck on the ship, which he supposedly got when they docked at the French Riviera. This is when 3:30 in the morning hits, and this is when George and his new wife Jennifer have an argument. It's not entirely known what the argument was about, but according to their friend Josh, it was likely about Jennifer being flirty with some of the men at the casino. Josh says that she was blatantly flirting with men in front of George, even including the casino's manager. And according to him, the manager was seen putting his arm around her. This caused George and Jennifer to get into a fight, which ended in Jennifer kneeing him in the groin and leaving alone. More specifically, leaving George behind. George continued to party with Josh, Greg, Zach, and Rusty for another 20 minutes or so before they all went back to George's cabin, room 9062, up on the 9th floor of the ship. The ship's key entry system records George and the men using the key and entering the room at 3:52 a.m. And they were expecting to see Jennifer there, but the room was empty. Drunk and wanting to look for his new wife, George and the men then leave the cabin to search the ship for her. But then they return to the cabin and are recorded again using the key and entering the room at 4:01 a.m. According to the 4 men, since they couldn't find Jennifer, they just helped put a really drunk George to bed. They took off his shoes, tucked him in, and left, proceeding to go back to their cabin and order a bunch of room service. That was that, and nothing more. Fast forward about 20 minutes. This puts us at 4:20 in the morning, and this is when some of the cruise ship staff find Jennifer. She was passed out drunk in a hallway in front of someone else's room. They quickly helped her back to her cabin, which was recorded once again on the key entry system. George should have been sound asleep in his bed, as only 20 minutes or so had passed since the 4 men supposedly tucked him into bed. But something happened in that 20 minutes, because George was nowhere to be found. The room was completely empty, and this was confirmed by the cruise ship employees. But Jennifer was so drunk that she just fell right to sleep, not knowing that something was horribly wrong. And just a few hours later, her life would never be the same. At around 8:30 the next morning, so roughly 4 hours later, one of the passengers on the ship woke up and wanted to take some beautiful pictures of the water. The metal lifeboat canopy, which was right below George's cabin, was covered in blood. Like, so much so that when this passenger looked at it, their first thought was that someone died there. In the blood appeared to be some handprints and footprints. So obviously the cruise ship security team was notified, who took a tally of everyone on the ship. And this is when they realized that the occupants of cabin 9062 were unaccounted for. Thankfully, they were able to quickly locate Jennifer, who was at the ship's spa for a scheduled massage. But George, nowhere to be found. This is when they informed her that George was missing, and a ton of blood was found beneath their cabin. So they asked her where he was, but she had no idea. She told police that she was so intoxicated the night before that she remembers nothing after fighting with George and leaving the casino alone. She tells them how she was found blacked out in a hallway at 4:20 in the morning, and when she got back to her cabin, George was not there. She didn't think much of it because I guess this wasn't the first time on the cruise that they had slept in different cabins. I don't know what their dynamic was, but George had reportedly stayed with Josh one night, and then with another couple who he befriended on the cruise another night. The ship was about to dock in Turkey, so while the ship was in port, Turkish police got involved and started searching and conducting interviews on the ship. But what's horrible is that Royal Caribbean didn't lock the ship down at all, so anyone was allowed to freely exit the ship, destroying any potential evidence or possibly contaminating it. It wasn't long into their investigation that suspicion started rising. Not only was George's blood found on the side of the ship, but his blood was also found in his own cabin. It wasn't a lot by any means, but it was a few drops of his blood on the bed sheets. The couple's cabin was messy, but not really trashed, and nothing appeared to be missing. But one thing police did find odd though was one of the ship's lounge chairs. It was pushed directly up against the railing, which stuck out to them and honestly made them feel like this could be a situation where George just jumped and ended his own life. Authorities used the key entry system and security footage from the ship to piece together a rough timeline, and they feel that George either fell or was intentionally pushed overboard at around 4 a.m. or shortly after, and that his body was somewhere in the water between Turkey and Greece. A massive search for George was kickstarted, but to this day, his body has never been found. Outside of not remembering much, Jennifer was quickly ruled out because of the time when she was found that night. She was found so far away from her and George's cabin, and it was right around the time when George is believed to have gone overboard, so this timeline rules her out as a suspect. Police then started interviewing the last known people to see George alive, which were his new friends, Josh, Greg, Zach, and Rusty. They told the police everything I told you earlier about them supposedly tucking him in and then leaving to go order some room service. But after a few interrogations, their stories started to fall apart. Josh began acting nervous and trying to deflect a lot of the attention off himself and to the ship's casino manager. He told police that the casino manager was super weird and overly flirty with Jennifer the night George disappeared, and he insisted that when Jennifer got in that fight with George and left, that the manager immediately followed her out. Josh said this really needed to be looked into and to go and interview him, so they did. But the casino manager was quickly cleared, and this was for a few reasons. Not only did Josh completely lie when he said he followed Jennifer out of the casino that night, witnesses confirmed that he in fact did not. But authorities were also able to verify that he used his keycard to enter his girlfriend's cabin that fateful night at 3:25 a.m. when George and Jennifer were still at the disco and long before he disappeared. The casino manager also took a polygraph test and passed, as did Jennifer, so they were telling the truth. Then authorities were able to go through the cruise ship's room service records to see whether or not the men had ordered room service to their cabins like they said they did. This would have given them some sort of alibi, but after reviewing the records, absolutely no room service was ever delivered to their cabins that night. A couple of really short phone calls were made to room service, but no order was ever placed. Or at the very least, it wasn't ever written down and logged, which was protocol. So I guess it's possible that a mistake was made by one of the room service employees, but it just seems unlikely. Then police started interviewing some of the other passengers that were neighbors to George and Jennifer, and their account of what happened makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. So that night, just after 4 a.m., one of the passengers in a neighboring cabin heard George and 4 other men inside his room. They were pretty rowdy and yelling in the room and out on the balcony, and it sounded like they were all fighting. This was so loud that security was actually called to the room a few times. The neighbor then looked out their door and saw 3 men leaving, which is weird because all 4 men had been inside that room. This has led people to believe that one of them was still inside with George, but this has never been proven. After the 3 men left, the neighbor then proceeded to hear what he described as a horrific horrifically loud thud, and then the sound of furniture moving. That horrifically loud thud is thought to be George as he went overboard, hitting the metal canopy. The neighbor was able to identify the 3 men he saw leaving as the 3 Russian-American men, Rusty, Greg, and Zach. So this looked pretty suspicious, which caught the police's attention. But then something else surfaced, a videotape to be exact, that kind of put the nail in the coffin. A videotape surfaced which was recorded by Josh and the 3 other men, and this was taken about an hour after George disappeared. In it, they all joked about George's death and made some pretty crude remarks. Rusty can be heard laughing, referring to George going parachute riding off his balcony, and Greg can be heard almost bragging about being involved somehow, saying, quote, "See, I told you I was gangster." End quote. And if this wasn't bad enough, 2 days after George disappeared, an 18-year-old passenger on the ship came forward and told police that 3 men had SA'd her not long before George went missing. To everyone's shock, the 3 men were Rusty, Greg, and Zach's little brother, which was also Greg's cousin. The woman told police that she was taken back to one of their cabins and was blackout drunk, but she would come to here and there to discover that she was being SA'd by these 3 men. Not only that though, but they were recording the SA. And who was recording it, you may ask? Josh Askin. The men tried saying this was all consensual, but in the video, the girl is seen and heard clearly crying. This is when everyone pretty much knew that these guys were somehow involved, and 20 days into the investigation, the FBI took over. All 4 of the men and their families were kicked off the ship once it docked in Naples. The SA was investigated by Italian authorities who really didn't want to get involved, so they said they had no jurisdiction and they let the men go. And to this day, no charges have ever been filed in the sexual assault case, even though it was literally recorded. And the fact that those same 4 men were the prime suspects in a literal disappearance on that same ship. Before they were kicked off though, Josh was overheard in one of the elevators on the ship by an employee where he said, quote, "I know more than they think I know. Those fuckers almost got me arrested in Turkey." End quote. Rusty, Josh, Greg, and Zach all failed their polygraph tests in connection to George's disappearance. Despite having all of this evidence, George has never been found, although police believe that he was a victim of foul play and is presumed dead. No charges have ever been filed in connection to this case, which is weird considering you have the main suspects on camera basically confessing to his murder, long before anyone even knew he was missing. And although we don't know what really happened to George, there are a few theories. Theory number 1, which is believed by the cruise ship's captain and Jennifer, is that George simply went overboard accidentally, that he was very drunk and just slipped over the railing of his balcony. And the main reason they think this is because of the chair that was found pushed up against his balcony. But police have found no evidence of this, and they believe that foul play was involved. They just don't have enough physical evidence to prove it. Theory number 2 is that George chose to end his own life. This doesn't make sense though, because he'd only been married for 11 days, and he was on the trip of his life. So his family doesn't believe this theory, or that it was an accident. What doesn't make sense to me though is that if he did just truly jump, why was there blood in his bed? That wouldn't be there if he jumped. And theory number 3 is that George was intentionally pushed off his balcony and he was murdered. Some people believe that this was a robbery gone wrong type of situation. George was somewhat well off and he always wore this really expensive watch. He and Jennifer also told a lot of people on the ship that they had a lot of wedding gift money back in their cabin, so some think that this made them a target, primarily to Josh, Rusty, Zach, and Greg. And once all 4 men put George in his bed when he was super drunk, maybe they tried to rob him. Experts say that the drops of blood found on his bed is somewhat consistent with getting pinched by a watch, so it's possible that the men tried forcefully taking the watch off George, pinching him in the process, which made him kind of sober up and wake up. Maybe he then tried to fight back, which resulted in him being pushed off the balcony. This would line up with the fight and sounds of a struggle that his neighbors heard. What I find weird though is that in 2012, this investigation was referred to the Mafia Division of the FBI, so I don't really know what that means, but that seems odd to me. Unfortunately, the FBI closed this case in 2015, meaning George's disappearance and death is still unsolved and has no resolution. Although all of the men lawyered up right away and have never been charged, one of them specifically stood out to the FBI, and it was Greg. Greg later went to prison on a 3-year sentence for drug trafficking, and when asked if he killed George, he said no. He may deal drugs, but he never had it in his heart to kill someone. He told the FBI that he didn't know what happened to him, but that it wasn't wasn't an accident and that he didn't end his own life. He said something bad happened to George that night, but he wouldn't elaborate more. In 2019, Greg was shot and killed in front of his home in Florida. Whoever killed him has never been found, and his death remains unsolved as well. Some believe it's because he slipped up and was telling the FBI too much, and that his death was connected to George's disappearance, but this has never been proven. A year after his disappearance, George's wife and parents received over $1 million from Royal Caribbean directly, and Jennifer has since gone on to get remarried. This is one of those cases that honestly pisses me off because it seems so clear what happened, yet almost no evidence was left behind to prove it. And that's scary to me, and one of the main reasons that I will never go on a cruise. But it's now been 20 years, and whatever happened to George on that cruise ship that night remains a mystery.
Oh yeah, one more thing. If y'all see me on Love Island, mind your fucking business, bitch. I'm trying to find love, bitch. Y'all had y'all motherfucking chance.
On a sunny morning in the summer of 2001, Andrea Yates drowned each of her 5 children, one by one, in her bathtub. She started with 3 of her little boys and then her 6-month-old daughter, who she left floating in the tub. When her last little boy came in and saw his baby sister in the water, he asked his mom what was wrong with her before running away. Andrea chased him down and drowned him as well. She then laid them all in her bed, tucked them under the covers, with one of them holding the baby girl, as if they were all sleeping. Andrea would later be found not guilty by reason of insanity and sent off to a psychiatric hospital where she remains to this day. She's had the opportunity to leave and return back into society, but she's refused to leave the hospital. This is one of those cases that is really heavy, and it sparks a lot of conversation about postpartum depression and psychosis, and how religion played into her delusions and hallucinations. I have 3 little babies myself, so I think that's also why this case weighs so heavy on my heart. As always, this is a really graphic story, so proceed with caution. But let's talk about the case that shocked the entire world. This is Andrea Yates. She grew up in Texas and was the youngest of 5 kids. From a really young age, she suffered from eating disorders and depression, and once she turned 17, that's when she started contemplating ending her own life. Despite all of this, she persevered, and she graduated high school in 1982 as the valedictorian of her class. She was an extremely smart girl and super athletic too, as she was the captain of her swim team. After graduating college, she went on to become a registered nurse at a really prestigious hospital in Houston, and in 1989, she met Rusty Yates, who she would later marry. Rusty was a NASA engineer, so pretty smart as well, and they bonded over their views on Christianity and religion. Immediately after marriage, Rusty and Andrea vowed to have as many babies as nature would allow them, and this was really the start of their downfall. They began moving back and forth between Texas and Florida for Rusty's job, usually living in really small trailers and motorhomes, and by 1999, they had 4 kids together. So moving around that much in small places paired with having so many kids back to back, it started to take a toll on Andrea. Her first baby was Noah, then John, then Paul, then Luke, and lastly, baby Mary in 2000. Not long after Luke was born in 1999, Rusty came home one day and found her shaking and chewing on her own fingers. And the day after this, she tried ending her own life by overdosing. This put her in the hospital where she was prescribed some antidepressants. But overall, nobody really knew the extent of her mental health decline or how serious the situation was starting to become. She was released almost immediately, where she then begged Rusty to let her end her own life while holding a knife up to her throat. She was once again hospitalized for this, where she was put on an antipsychotic medication called Haldol. This medication plays a big factor as this case continues. After being put on Haldol, her condition improved pretty quickly, so once again she was released and instructed to keep taking the medication. But in July of 1999, so just 1 month after that first hospitalization, she had a nervous breakdown accompanied by 2 suicide attempts and 2 more psychiatric stays. This is when she was officially diagnosed with postpartum psychosis, mainly because she had thoughts of killing her children to save them from going to hell. Her first psychiatrist really understood the severity of the situation and urged Andrea and Rusty to not have any more children. They were warned that having more children would pretty much guarantee future psychotic depression, but sadly, they did not listen. Within 7 weeks of being released from this hospital stay and after being diagnosed with postpartum psychosis, Andrea was pregnant with her 5th and final child. Andrea seemed to be doing okay, all things considered, up until her dad died in March of 2001. This is when she reverted back into psychosis, started mutilating herself, and would frantically always be reading the Bible. At this point, she had her last child, and baby Mary was right around 4 months old, which is around the age when she started eating real food and not just milk. But because Andrea was in psychosis, she stopped feeding Mary the amount she needed. Her condition continued to get worse until she was in a near catatonic state, which once again landed her in the hospital. It's now May of 2001, 1 month before the murders of these beautiful babies. This is when Andrea switched psychiatrists, and even though she was obviously not doing well and in a catatonic state, this doctor thought it would be a good idea to completely take her off Haldol, the only medication that showed some sort of improvement. Even though she was clearly ill, Andrea was once again released back home to take care of her babies. It wouldn't be long though until she was hospitalized once more after filling up her bathtub in the middle of the day. She later told police that she had planned to drown each of her kids that day, but she changed her mind. She then planned to kill herself in the tub, but was hospitalized before she got the chance to do so. This brings us to that fateful day, June 20th, 2001. That morning, Rusty left Andrea at home to go to work, meaning she was alone with the kids. This was something that was not supposed to happen per her doctor's orders, saying she basically needed to be supervised 24/7, otherwise she could cause herself or her babies harm. But nevertheless, Rusty left that day, and I guess he thought that it would be okay because Andrea's mom was supposed to be coming over within the next hour to take over kid duty. But in that 1 hour period, Andrea snapped and did the unimaginable. In that 60 minutes, Andrea drowned all 5 of her kids, one by one, in the bathtub. She started with Paul, then Luke, and then John. And once they were all deceased, she laid them in her bed under the covers. She then grabbed baby Mary and drowned her as well, leaving her face down and floating in the tub. This is when 7-year-old Noah walked into the bathroom and saw his baby sister, and he asked his mom what was wrong with her. It's not known what she said, but whatever it was, it scared Noah so much that he took off running. Sadly, Andrea caught up to him and drowned him as well, right next to his baby sister. This time, she took baby Mary's body and put her in John's arms in the bed, as if they were all sleeping, and she left Noah floating in the tub. Andrea then very calmly called 911 and told the operator that she needed an officer, but she wouldn't tell them why. When police and paramedics arrived at her house, they walked into a very disturbing and heartbreaking scene. Needless to say, Andrea was quickly arrested, where she then confessed to drowning all 5 of her kids one by one in the tub. She told police that she waited for her husband Rusty to leave for work because she knew he would interrupt her killing them. And she also went out of her way to lock their family dog up in a cage, which it usually wasn't, because she knew that the dog would also try and interfere with her drowning the kids. Despite her eerie confession, Rusty stood by her and actually got one of their family friends to be her attorney. At the trial, the main focal point was Andrea's postpartum depression and psychosis, and her team was trying to push for the not guilty by reason of insanity plea. The defense agreed that she was psychotic and very ill, but Texas law requires that in order to successfully assert the insanity defense, the defendant must prove that they could not discern right from wrong at the time of the crime. And in this case, it was hard to prove because she admitted to waiting for Rusty to leave for work to kill her kids, even going so far as to subdue the dog so it wouldn't get in her way. Because of this, at the first trial in 2002, the jury rejected the insanity defense. They found her guilty on all 5 counts of murder, and although prosecutors sought the death penalty, Andrea was ultimately sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole in 40 years. This sentence didn't last very long though, because in 2006, the Texas Court of Appeals reversed the conviction. One of the main reasons for doing this was because a California psychologist and prosecution witness for this case, named Dr. Park Dietz, admitted to giving a false testimony during Andrea's trial. He gave a testimony that right before the murders, an episode of Law & Order aired on TV that featured a woman who drowned her kids, but was acquitted of murder by reason of insanity. What's super crazy and coincidental though, is that an author who just so happened to be covering the Yates trial for the Oprah magazine and NBC News had also previously been a writer for Law & Order, and she knew for a fact that no such episode like the one Dr. Park mentioned had ever existed at this point. It just wasn't true. And so the Texas Court of Appeals then said that the jury could have been influenced by this false testimony, so a new trial was needed. A little side note before I continue, but a Law & Order episode did air 2 years later that was based on Andrea's case, but it never existed at the time of the trial. So at the new trial, authorities tried saying that Andrea committed this crime for spousal revenge, but this avenue was thoroughly explored and no evidence was found for this. This time around, Andrea pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, and the new jury agreed with this. She was then granted immediate release on the condition that she be admitted to a mental health treatment facility, at least for some time before returning back into society. So off Andrea went to the Kerrville State Hospital, where she has remained ever since. Every year, she's able to go through a competency hearing, where it could be a real possibility for her to be released. But time and time again, she waives her right to the hearing, voluntarily choosing to stay at the mental health facility. I don't know if this is a sign of guilt or if she truly doesn't think she can get better, but one of the biggest points of contention in this case is Rusty's role or responsibility. Andrea's doctor advised him not to leave her alone with the kids at any point, but in the weeks leading leading up to the murders, he did just that. He said he thought that it would help her improve her independence. He confessed to her family just 1 week before this tragic event that he would leave her alone for an hour every morning and every night. And he did this so she wouldn't be so totally dependent on him and his family for her own maternal responsibilities. His view on mental health was reportedly not great, and Andrea's family said that Rusty believed all depressed people needed was a swift kick in the pants to get them motivated. These were all his words. Rusty also said that he was never made aware that she was psychotic, or that her first doctor advised against having more children, even though the doctor's notes clearly stated that it should not happen. But what's super sad is that Andrea told her prison psychiatrist that this was not the case, and that prior to her and Rusty's last child, she did not want to have sex because that meant that she could possibly hurt her kids. But Rusty pressured her into it, saying not to worry, she was a good mom and could handle more kids. But Rusty even said during the trial that he thought she'd be found innocent, and he wanted to have even more kids with her once she was treated by any means necessary. How crazy is that? She was so mentally ill that she killed all 5 of their kids one by one. Yet his strong religious beliefs made him want to continue having kids with her by any means necessary. That's twisted and super disturbing, and honestly, so irresponsible and dangerous of him. Once she was initially found guilty, Rusty went on the record and blamed her new psychiatrist, not himself, for not recognizing and treating her psychosis. He said they legally had to release her from the hospital after 10 days due to an insurance constraint from their provider, Blue Cross Blue Shield. This, in his words, makes it their fault. A different doctor weighing in kind of backed him up on this logic, saying the reason Andrea did this could be because of Effexor, which is an antidepressant. Her new psychiatrist had taken her cold turkey off of Haldol and put her on this other drug. So for the entire month before the murders, Andrea was taking 450 milligrams of Effexor, which is twice the recommended maximum dose. This drug was known to possibly cause homicidal ideations. Other doctors say that this dosage/prescription isn't completely unusual, and it could have nothing to do with her committing this crime. It could also be that she stopped taking Haldol cold turkey, which caused her to snap. While she was in prison, Andrea told her psychiatrist that she had been partially influenced by a close family friend on Rusty's side who was very religious. This caused her to believe that her kids were going to hell and couldn't be saved because of her own struggles, and the only way out was to kill them. She said she planned to kill them for about 2 years, and then went on to say, quote, "It was the 7th deadly sin. My children weren't righteous. They stumbled because I was evil. The way I was raising them, they could never be saved. They were doomed to perish in the fires of hell." End quote. In 2005, Rusty divorced Andrea and went on to get remarried and have another child. They have since divorced as well. This is one of the few cases that really shook not just Texas, but the entire world. What makes this case so haunting isn't just what she did. It's that she seemingly loved her kids. Every single person who knows her says that. But postpartum depression and psychosis had such a terrifying grip on her that love wasn't enough to fight it. And here's what really disturbs me. Postpartum depression affects up to 1 in 5 new moms. Happens in about 2 out of every 1,000 births. Those numbers might sound small, but when it's left untreated, the consequences can be catastrophic. And yet, nobody wants to talk about it. There's so much stigma around this and so much silence. But if we keep looking away, if we keep treating it like something that only happens once in a blue moon, then tragedies like this don't just stay in the past, they repeat. And that's the part that should keep all of us up at night.
Guys, I want to tell you guys a story of my experience with from what I think was a cannibal when I was 15 years old. So I met this guy. He lived in my city, and by the way, he's famous. Like, he has 2 million followers, and he hasn't posted in a really long time. And when I go to his page, people are like, "Oh, where are you? Like, he's doing a mental health break." No, babe. No. If you look his name up on the internet, it says blank groomed me, blank allegations. I think he has too many victims that have posted stuff, and I think he's paying people off, because when you click on those search recommendations, it's just a bunch of nothing. It takes you to his TikTok, and DMCAs are a thing. So and I understand DMCAs. You can pretty much get anything you want taken down if you pay somebody. So basically, I met this guy. The first time we ever hung out, he was like, "You're not wearing that, go inside," and changed my outfit. And before you think, oh, he was dressing a little bit more modest,
No, this guy literally picks out like the skimpiest outfit ever. He turns my crop top into a bra and my jeans into a skirt, which I didn't really care. I was at the time, you guys, living with my sisters in an apartment, and my mom and her boyfriend lived 2 hours away, and we were all just attending the high school down the street. So I didn't really have much, and he was buying me groceries that day, so I was like, period, a man I can use. And that sounds really horrible, but I was in like fight or flight my whole growing up. So the first time I ever hung out with him, it really wasn't that bad. All he did though that was like red flaggish was like he brought up an ex. He was like, oh, like I hurt my ex so bad, like, and I'm just thinking like, oh, like maybe he like cheated on her, like, you know, like. And so I was rebounding with this guy. I just got my heart broken, so I was like, oh, like what happened, you know, like what's wrong, why? And he was like, oh, like I hurt her. And now like I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh, by hurt did he mean like try to eat her, like okay, so he already was like verbally abusive on like day 2 of us hanging out. I was in this man's car, and I was VAPING, and he snatched out my hands, and he was like pointed at a homeless guy, and he was like, do you want to be fucking homeless, like getting in my face, yelling at me, calling me like a low life basically. And I'm just like crying, begging him to stop. Like this man's in my face screaming at me, and I'm like, please stop, like okay, like. And he's like, you're sleeping at my house tonight, and I'm taking these, and you're going 24 hours without them if you want them back. So he like has my stuff. So I stay the night at his house that night, and I throw up of anxiety, and I get my stuff back in the morning. And I should have left, but I was 15 at this time, and I didn't have like any self-respect at all. And evil enough, this is like the best influence I have in my life at the time. He doesn't want me doing bad stuff, like, okay, so one day, another time I stayed the night at his house, he was like, what are your grades? Let me see your grades. And I'm like, oh my god. I show him my grades, and he's just like, you know, like angry once again, mad, like, you're sorting this out right now. So he brings me over to his desk, and he's like, sit on my lap, and he forces me to write an email to every single teacher that I had a bad grade in their class, and explain myself, and like basically ask for extra credit and chances to fix my grades. And so he's like forcing me to do this, and he's like, if you can get your grades up, I will buy you a SIM card. But I will just buy you a SIM card because I need to be able to get a hold of you. So, free SIM card? Question mark. Obviously, it's very questionable, very weird. And so one night I come over to his house, and that night he had just bought a ring light, and I help him set it up. And he's like, let's use this ring light, like let's do a photo shoot. I have like a great idea in mind. So I'm like, okay, like I'm down for photo shoots, because he was pretty TikTok famous. Like I think at the time he had like 800k on TikTok. This was in 2020. And so we would do like photo shoots, because I had like 15k on TikTok at the time. So we would do like photo shoots and things like that. So he's like, okay, so take your clothes off and lay on the bed like this. So like helps me get situated in a position. He's like setting his phone. He's like, I will be right back. And he comes back with a knife and a fork and records everything. And then he's like, with the photos of it, he sends it to my phone, and like takes my phone and posts it to my private Instagram so that my like ex, who wasn't my ex, would see it. And yeah, he made me post it. A very inappropriate, violent photo. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm never hanging out with this man again. Like, this is so God. I want to go home. So he takes me home, and as I'm shutting my apartment door, he's like, can I come in? Like, and I'm, yes, you can come in. Like, I have to go to bed soon. I'm tired, you know? I just wanted to be able to hit my stuff without him getting angry at me. So I'm like, oh, please hurry. And he comes to my house and he's like, sit on my lap, and he's like talking to me. And he's like, you know, like, do you know who my idol is? And I'm like, who? Who's your idol? And he says, Ted Bundy. And I'm like, oh. That makes a lot of sense after the last ordeal. So anyways, I cut him off. I don't say anything. I simply ghost him. And I'm like avoiding this problem. I ghost him. So after a couple days of ghosting him, he's like spamming me, non-stop texting, like, where are you? Answer me. And I'm just avoiding him, staying at my neighbor's house at the time because I had like a neighbor next door who also didn't have parents, who was my age. And he was like my best friend at that time. I'm staying at his house, and I come home to my apartment just to grab some stuff, to grab some face wash, my toothbrush and stuff, because I was kind of living with my friend at this time. And I didn't have a key to this apartment. None of us had a key to this apartment, and he knew that. My mom, for some reason, like out of punishment, like took the apartment keys so that we couldn't lock the door anymore. I don't know what it was about. I think it was so nobody would lock the door. And so he knew that my door didn't lock, and I come home one day and I go in my elevator on the way to the apartment room, and I like smell the air, and I'm like, it really smells like this guy. Like, it smells like he was in here. And I'm walking down the hall to my apartment, and I'm like, what? It actually smells like he's here. I open my apartment door and I go inside, and is he in here? And I go into my bedroom, and there's an outfit laid out on my bed. So yeah, anyways, that was a whole ordeal. I ended up running away, not because of him. And by the way, my sister to this day is always like, dude, he knew he didn't have a fucking key. Like I can't believe you put us in date. Like, my sister gets mad about it. Like, this guy was so creepy. So even my friend too, my home girl that I lived with, like, she knew about all this. He was harassing me in my TikTok comments, going off when I was living with her. And there was this like TikTok of him, like, to this audio where it's like, run rabbit run, or something like that. And every time we'd hear it, she would like scream, and she was like, we were like scared because we would like envision him because he was like this in the fucking video. And oh my gosh, traumatizing. And I didn't really register it until I turned 16. I was like, that's really weird. Oh, and I just want to say, you guys, I was 15 when this all happened, and when I met him, I thought he was 18, but I just looked up his age, and he's 4 years older than me. So